In the prosperous village of Zuwana, a kind-hearted young woman named Nabula was known for her gentle nature and selfless spirit. She had grown up in a modest home, raised by parents who taught her the values of kindness and patience. When she married Omari, a wealthy and respected man, she believed her life would be filled with love and happiness. Omari was a man of great influence in the village, admired for his business success and strong character. Nabula was eager to build a life with him, dreaming of a home filled with warmth and mutual respect. However, from the very moment Nabula stepped into Omari's grand household, she realized that her journey would not be as joyful as she had hoped. Omari's mother, Madaki, was a woman who ruled the household with an iron fist. She was known for her sharp tongue, cold heart, and an unshakable belief that no woman was good enough for her son. To Madaki, Nabula's humble background was an insult, a stain on the family's reputation. She despised the idea that a simple village girl would be the wife of her accomplished son. Determined to rid the household of Nabula, Madaki wasted no time in making her life unbearable. She humiliated her at every turn, criticizing her every move, finding faults where there were none. If Nabula cooked, Madaki claimed the food was tasteless. If she cleaned, Madaki pointed out an invisible speck of dust. No matter what Nabula did, it was never enough. Yet, through all the insults and cruelty, Nabula remained patient, believing that with time, her kindness and respect would soften Madaki's heart. But Madaki had no intention of ever accepting her. She saw Nabula not as a daughter-in-law, but as an intruder who needed to be pushed out. Madaki's hatred for Nabula only grew stronger with time. She could not accept that her son had married a woman from a poor background. Every time she looked at Nabula, she saw someone unworthy, someone who did not deserve to be a part of their wealthy and respected family. Her resentment turned into cruel actions, and she made it her mission to break Nabula's spirit. From the moment Nabula woke up in the morning until late at night, Madaki made sure she never had a moment of peace. She forced her to do all the housework, even though there were servants in the household. While others rested, Nabula scrubbed the floors, washed piles of clothes, and cooked elaborate meals for the entire family. If she made even the smallest mistake, Madaki would shout at her, calling her useless and unfit to be Omari's wife. Nabula was not even allowed to eat properly. Madaki made sure she was always the last to eat, giving her only leftovers or scraps that were barely enough to satisfy her hunger. Some days, she was given nothing at all, forced to go to bed with an empty stomach, while Madaki and the others enjoyed rich meals. Despite the harsh treatment, Nabula never complained. She believed that if she continued to show love and respect, Madaki would one day accept her as a daughter. She held on to the hope that with time, things would change, and she would finally be welcomed as a true member of the family. But Madaki had no intention of changing. Instead, her cruelty only grew worse, as if she wanted to push Nabula to the point of breaking. One evening, after a long day of endless chores, Nabula was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Madaki stormed in with a furious expression. In her hands, she held a small pouch of missing coins from the family store. She waved it in front of Nabula's face, her voice sharp with accusation. "You are a thief!" Madaki screamed. "I knew from the beginning that a girl like you would bring shame to this family. How dare you steal from us?" Nabula's eyes widened in shock. She had never stolen anything in her life. "I swear, Mama Madaki, I did not take anything," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "I would never do such a thing." But Madaki was not interested in the truth. She had made up her mind and wanted to punish Nabula in the worst way possible. She grabbed Nabula by the arm and dragged her towards the large cooking fire at the center of the kitchen. The flames flickered wildly, their heat making Nabula's skin prickle with fear. "If you are innocent," Madaki said with a cruel smirk, "then put your hands over the fire. Let the gods judge you." Nabula gasped, her heart pounding. She looked around, hoping someone would stop this madness, but the servants dared not interfere. They lowered their heads, afraid of Madaki's wrath. With no one to defend her, Nabula had no choice. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she slowly stretched her hands over the fire. The moment her skin met the heat, unbearable pain shot through her arms. She bit her lips to keep from screaming, but the pain was too much to bear. Her hands burned, the flesh blistering and turning red as Madaki watched with satisfaction. Moments later, Madaki yanked Nabula's arms away from the fire. "That should teach you a lesson," she sneered. "Now, let's see how you will work with those hands." When Omari returned home that night, Madaki twisted the story to her advantage. "Your wife is careless," she told him. "She burned herself while cooking, and now she cannot even do simple household chores. Omari, trusting his mother, believed every word. Instead of comforting Nabula, he scolded her for being reckless. Nabula lay in bed that night, her hands wrapped in cloth, throbbing with pain. She knew she could no longer work like before, and that only meant one thing. Madaki would have even more reasons to despise her. But what hurt the most was Omari's blindness to her suffering. She had always believed he would protect her, but now she felt more alone than ever. As days passed, Nabula's burned hands slowly healed, but the scars remained, both on her skin and in her heart. She struggled to do even the simplest tasks, and Madaki took every opportunity to remind her of her uselessness. "Look at you," Madaki would say with a mocking laugh. "You can't even hold a broom properly. What kind of wife are you?" Omari, who once showed Nabula kindness, began to grow distant. Madaki whispered poisonous words into his ears every day. "Ever since you married this woman, our household has known nothing but trouble," she told him. "She is cursed, Omari. First, she burns herself, and now she cannot even take care of her duties. If you keep her, she will bring ruin to your name." At first, Omari hesitated. Deep down, he knew Nabula was kind and gentle, but his mother's words were like a slow poison, seeping into his thoughts. Soon, he began to see Nabula, not as the loving wife he had married, but as a burden. He stopped speaking to her, barely looking at her when he came home. Nabula felt the change, and it crushed her. The man she had given her heart to was slipping away, and there was nothing she could do. One day, Madaki called for a gathering of the family elders. In front of everyone, she declared that Nabula had brought misfortune to the household. She claimed that Omari deserved a better wife, one who would bring prosperity, not shame. Without giving Nabula a chance to defend herself, Madaki announced that Omari would take a new wife, Salima, the daughter of a wealthy merchant. Nabula's heart shattered at the news. Salima was beautiful and came from a powerful family. It was clear that Madaki had planned this from the beginning. Omari, standing beside his mother, did not object. He simply lowered his head, unwilling to fight for the woman who had once been his partner. Madaki did not even allow Nabula to gather her belongings. "Leave this house now," she ordered coldly. "You are no longer welcome here." Tears streamed down Nabula's face as she stepped out of the home she had once thought would be her forever. She had nothing. No money, no food, no family to turn to. She walked aimlessly through the village, her heart heavy with sorrow. As the doors of Omari's house closed behind her, she realized she was truly alone. Nabula wandered the village streets, her feet dragging with exhaustion. The sun had set, and the night air was cold against her skin. She had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. She walked until her legs could no longer carry her. Finally collapsing near the riverbank, she lay there, weak and defeated, her body trembling from hunger and pain. Morning came, and the gentle sound of water flowing filled the air. A kind old man, Elder Mukasa, was passing by with his donkey, carrying bundles of medicinal herbs. He noticed a figure lying by the river, motionless. Concerned, he rushed over and knelt beside Nabula. Her face was pale, her hands still scarred from the burns. Her eyes fluttered open, barely able to focus on the man before her. "You are not meant to die here, child," Mukasa said softly. He lifted her onto his donkey and took her with him to his village, a peaceful place nestled between the hills. In Mukasa's home, Nabula was given food, water, and a warm place to rest. The old healer carefully treated her wounds, applying special herbal ointments that soothed her scars. Every day he checked on her, speaking to her gently, encouraging her to regain her strength. Slowly, her body began to heal, but the pain in her heart remained. Seeing her sadness, Mukasa decided to teach Nabula the art of healing. "Pain teaches us the value of kindness," he told her. "You have suffered, but now you can use your pain to help others." At first, Nabula doubted herself. She had never learned anything beyond housework, and she feared she was not strong enough. But Mukasa was patient, guiding her step by step. He showed her how to mix herbs, how to make healing balms, and how to treat wounds. With time, Nabula discovered that she had a gift for healing. She listened to the stories of those who came seeking help, offering not just medicine, but comfort. As the years passed, Nabula became a respected healer in Mukasa's village. The people admired her wisdom and kindness. She no longer saw herself as the helpless girl who had been cast out. She had become a woman of strength and purpose. The scars on her hands remained, but they no longer brought her shame. Instead, they reminded her of how far she had come. Nabula fully embraced her new life in Mukasa's village. Every morning, she woke up early to gather herbs from the forest, carefully selecting leaves and roots that could heal wounds and cure sickness. She learned to grind them into powders, mix them into potions, and prepare soothing balms. But more than her skill, it was her kindness that made her special. She treated not just the body, but also the heart, listening to people's troubles and offering comforting words. Soon, people from nearby villages began seeking her help. Mothers brought their sick children. Farmers came to her for remedies for their aching backs, and elders visited her for relief from their pains. Word spread quickly about the young healer with the scarred hands and a golden heart. People said that she was blessed by the gods, that her touch could cure even the deepest wounds. One day, messengers arrived from Zuwana, the very village where Nabula had once been cast out. They carried a message from the king himself. The great ruler of Zuwana had fallen ill, and none of his healers could find a cure. His body grew weaker by the day, and fear spread across the land. The people whispered that if the king died, the kingdom would fall into chaos. The king's advisors had heard of a remarkable healer living in Mukasa's village. They had heard how she cured the sick, how she brought comfort to those in pain. Desperate, the king sent for her, hoping she would be his last chance. When Nabula heard the summons, her heart pounded. Zuwana, the place where she had once suffered, the place where she had been thrown away like she was nothing. Now they were calling her back, not as a beggar, but as a healer. For a moment, she hesitated. Should she return to the place that had once caused her so much pain? But then she remembered Mukasa's words. Pain teaches us the value of kindness. She had healed so many people. Perhaps this was her chance to heal the past as well. Taking a deep breath, Nabula packed her healing herbs, tied them carefully in a cloth, and prepared for the journey. She would return to Zuwana, not as the weak girl they had cast out, but as a woman of strength and wisdom. Nabula's journey back to Zuwana was long, but she traveled with confidence. The days of being a helpless girl were behind her. Now, she was a healer, a woman respected by many. She no longer feared the village that had once rejected her. Instead, she was ready to face it with her head held high. When she arrived at the palace gates, the guards looked at her with curiosity. They had been expecting a powerful healer, not a woman dressed in simple robes with a bag of herbs. But when the royal advisors saw her, they immediately recognized her wisdom. They led her inside, past the grand halls she had never dreamed of entering, until she stood before the king. The great ruler of Zuwana lay weak on his bed, his face pale, his breath shallow. The palace healers had tried everything, but nothing had worked. Nabula knelt beside him, gently touching his wrist to feel his pulse. She listened carefully, observing his symptoms with the knowledge she had gained from Elder Mukasa. "I can heal him," she said with certainty. The room fell silent. No one had spoken with such confidence before. She worked quickly, preparing a special mixture of herbs. She brewed a bitter tea, pressing it to the king's lips, making sure he drank every drop. She massaged healing oils into his skin, whispering words of comfort as she worked. For 3 days and nights, she remained by his side, watching over him, ensuring that he followed her treatment. Then, on the 4th morning, something miraculous happened. The king sat up. His strength had returned, and his eyes, once dull and tired, now shone with life. A wave of relief spread through the palace. The healers marveled at Nabula's skill, and the king, filled with gratitude, stood before his people and declared, "This woman has saved my life. From this day forward, she shall be the royal healer and my trusted advisor." News of Nabula's success spread quickly across Zuwana. The people who had once ignored her now spoke of her with admiration. But while Nabula was rising in honor, the household she had left behind was falling apart. Omari's new wife, Salima, had turned out to be nothing like the perfect woman Madaki had imagined. She was selfish, demanding, and unfaithful. She cared nothing for Omari, spending his wealth without thought. Whispers spread that she had been seen in the company of another man. Omari, once proud and confident, now walked with shame, realizing too late that he had made a terrible mistake. Madaki, too, began to feel the weight of her past actions. She had cast Nabula out, believing she was unworthy of her son. But now Nabula was honored by the king himself. Meanwhile, her own household was filled with disgrace. The woman she had chosen for Omari had brought nothing but ruin. It was a bitter truth, and it was only the beginning of her downfall. Madaki had always walked through the village with pride, her head held high, believing she was above everyone else. She had spent years controlling her household, making sure everything was done her way. But now, things were different. Whispers followed her wherever she went. People no longer bowed to her in respect. Instead, they looked at her with judgment and scorn. The truth about her cruelty had spread far and wide. The villagers spoke of how she had mistreated Nabila, how she had burned her hands and thrown her out like she was nothing. And now, the same Nabila had returned, not as a broken woman, but as the royal healer, honored by the king himself. The people of Zuwana did not forget easily. They had once believed Madaki to be a strong and respectable woman, but now they saw her for who she truly was, a heartless mother-in-law who had destroyed her own son's happiness out of pride and selfishness. As for Omari, he was no longer the proud and successful man he had once been. His wife, Salima, had drained his wealth, spending lavishly on herself while giving him no love or respect. She never cared for him the way Nabila once had. And when Omari's fortune began to dwindle, Salima did not hesitate to leave. One morning, Omari woke up to find that she was gone, along with all the gold and valuables in their home. She had run away with another man, leaving Omari alone to face the shame. With no wife, no money, and no respect, Omari became a shadow of his former self. He could no longer walk through the village with pride. Instead, he lowered his head, avoiding the stares of the people who once admired him. Madaki, too, suffered the consequences of her actions. Without Omari's wealth and reputation to protect her, she was left with nothing. The people she had once looked down on refused to help her. No one invited her into their homes. No one greeted her with warmth. She was left to wander the streets of Zuwana, searching for food, hoping for mercy from those she had once mistreated. Her fine clothes became worn and dirty. Her once beautiful jewelry was sold just to buy scraps of food. The same hands that had once punished Nabila were now stretched out in desperation, begging for kindness from the same villagers she had once ignored. Madaki had spent years believing she was above everyone else, but now she was at the lowest point of her life. The woman who had once ruled her household with cruelty was now nothing more than a beggar, abandoned and forgotten. One afternoon, as Nabila walked through the bustling marketplace, she noticed a frail woman sitting on the ground, her hands stretched out in desperation. The woman's once proud face was now thin and tired, her clothes tattered and covered in dust. It was Madaki, the mighty mother-in-law who had once ruled over her with cruelty, was now begging for food, ignored by the same villagers she had once looked down upon. For a moment, Nabila stood still, watching. The past came rushing back, the insults, the endless work, the pain of the fire burning her hands. She had every reason to walk away, to leave Madaki to suffer as she had suffered. But Nabila was not like her. Revenge would not heal her wounds. Instead, she saw an opportunity to teach Madaki a lesson she would never forget. She called for her guards and instructed them to bring Madaki to her home. The villagers watched in shock as the royal healer took in the woman who had once cast her out. Madaki, too, was stunned. She had expected Nabila to ignore her, maybe even humiliate her in public. But instead, she was given a small hut near Nabula's household. Madaki was not treated as a guest. She was not given luxury or comfort. Instead, she was given work, simple but humbling tasks. She swept the courtyards, fetched water, and prepared herbs under Nabula's guidance. Every day, she watched as people from all over Zuwana came to seek Nabula's wisdom and healing. She saw the respect in their eyes, the admiration they had for the woman she had once called worthless. For the first time in her life, Madaki felt true shame. She had thrown Nabula out, believing she was nothing. Yet here she was, standing in a position of honor, while she, Madaki, lived in disgrace. It was a bitter lesson, but one she could not escape. Meanwhile, Omari, now a broken man, finally gathered the courage to face Nabula. He came to her, his once strong posture now bent with regret. His voice was low and filled with sorrow as he spoke. Nabula, I was blind. I let my mother's hatred poison my heart. I turned my back on you when you needed me most. I do not deserve your forgiveness, but I ask for it. Nabula looked at him, the man she had once loved, the man who had betrayed her so easily. She felt no anger, no sadness, only a deep understanding that the past could not be undone. She gave him a small, knowing smile and said, I have already moved on, Omari. I hope you find peace. With those words, she turned and walked away, leaving Omari to face the weight of his choices. He had lost the best thing in his life, and there was no going back. Nabila was no longer the helpless girl he had abandoned. She had become something greater, strong, wise, and untouchable. As the years passed, Nabula's name became known in every corner of Zuwana. People spoke of her kindness, her wisdom, and her incredible journey from a broken young woman to a powerful healer and advisor to the king. She was no longer just a healer. She was a symbol of hope and justice. Women who had once suffered in silence now found the courage to stand up for themselves because they had Nabula to protect them. She created shelters for abandoned wives and mistreated daughters-in-law, ensuring that no woman in Zoana would suffer the way she once had. The village elders often sought her advice, and even the king himself respected her words. When she walked through the streets, people bowed their heads in admiration. Mothers pointed her out to their daughters, telling them to be strong like Nabula. The very household that had once rejected her now welcomed her as its true ruler. Madaki, now old and weak, watched all of this from the small hut Nabula had given her. She saw how the people loved the woman she had once called worthless. She had tried to destroy Nabula, believing that she was unworthy of her son and her home. But fate had proven her wrong. It was not Nabula who had been cast out in disgrace. It was her. Sitting alone in the courtyard, Madaki thought about her past mistakes. She had been cruel, blinded by pride. And now, she had nothing left but regret. The power she once had was gone, and the woman she had hated was now greater than she could have ever imagined. Nabula never treated Madaki with the same cruelty she had suffered. She gave her food, shelter, and dignity, but she never let her forget. Every day, Madaki woke up in a home ruled by the very person she had tried to destroy, and every day, she was reminded of the final lesson: kindness and justice will always triumph over hatred. Madaki realized her mistakes, but it was too late to undo them. The woman she had underestimated now stood above her, not out of revenge, but because she had become something Madaki never could, a true leader.